The message came at 8:04 a.m., just as Vivian was pouring her second cup of coffee. "Thanks for the gifts, Mom. Paris is amazing. You really went all out for us." Vivian stared at the screen, her fingers tightening around the mug. Her hands had always been steady. She'd once negotiated six-figure contracts without blinking, but now they trembled. She didn't reply. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. Instead, she walked to the dining table where yesterday's unopened envelope still sat, thick with numbers and unspoken betrayal. She opened it slowly, unfolded the crisp white pages, and saw them. $53,204.87. In a single day. Luxury jewelry, first-class flights, a 5-star hotel suite, spa treatments, designer boutiques. The charges marched down the page like a parade of theft. And all of it, every penny, had been charged to her corporate credit card, not her personal one, the one tied to a dormant but still legally active business, the one she had built with her late husband, David Hart, brick by brick, deal by deal. Vivian exhaled, slow, controlled. She wasn't just hurt. She was insulted. The gall of Rachel, her son Lucas's wife, was breathtaking. To steal, to flaunt it, to thank her like it was a joke. And Lucas, he hadn't called, hadn't checked in, not even to wish her a safe weekend. She reached for her phone again, not to reply, but to reread the text, to burn it into memory. Vivian Hart, 65, widow, mother, businesswoman. They thought she'd grown soft. They forgot who she used to be. And what they didn't know was this: the card Rachel used had a secret attached. A legal one. And Vivian Hart, she was done being quiet. It hadn't always been this way. Vivian had tried, really truly tried. When Lucas married Rachel 3 years ago, Vivian welcomed her into the family with open arms. She bought her gifts, complimented her style, praised her cooking even when it was bland, and laughed off the occasional passive-aggressive remark, all because she wanted to be part of their new life, all because she couldn't bear to lose her only child. Rachel had seemed charming at first, effervescent, warm, eager to help, but beneath the smiles were signs Vivian chose to ignore. At their wedding, Vivian arrived early, dressed in soft blue lace, David's favorite color on her, but somehow, her place at the family table had been forgotten. She spent the reception at a side table, seated next to a distant cousin with hearing aids and a disdain for small talk, watching Rachel glide from guest to guest like royalty. "It was just an oversight," Lucas had said later, with a tired smile. "You know how stressed Rachel was about the seating chart. Don't take it personally, Mom." Vivian hadn't. She'd excused the first missed family photo, then the second, then the fifth. "Oh, we just snapped it really quick," Rachel would chirp. "Let's get another one later." Later never came. One Christmas, Vivian spent weeks knitting Rachel a scarf in her favorite color, soft gray cashmere. Rachel opened it, held it up for 3 seconds, and said, "How thoughtful. I'm sure someone will love this." Vivian found it 2 months later in their hallway closet, Goodwill tag still attached. Still, she kept trying. She invited them for brunch, cooked Lucas's favorite meals, asked Rachel about her work, her dreams, her goals. Rachel always smiled, always answered, but never asked a single question back. And then came the more insidious moments. "You already told us that story, remember?" Rachel would say sweetly. Except Vivian hadn't. "You seem a little forgetful these days, Viv," she'd joke, glancing at Lucas for agreement. He'd smile, awkwardly, and not say a word. It was death by 1,000 cuts. But Vivian took every blow in silence, telling herself it was worth it to be close to her son, to feel needed, to still belong. What she didn't know was that Rachel wasn't just pushing her to the margins. She was testing how far she could go, how much she could take, and what she could get away with. The morning after the message, Vivian laid every credit card statement she had across the kitchen table. There, between her grocery purchases and utility bills, were the transactions that changed everything. $18,245, Tiffany Co. $22,700, Cartier. $3,500, Serenity Spa Experience. $9,800, first-class flights to Paris. It was all there, precise, audacious, unapologetic. Vivian leaned back in the same wooden chair she had shared with David for nearly 4 decades. He used to read the paper while she refilled his coffee. Now she sat alone reading through a paper trail of betrayal. $53,000 in a single day. More than she'd spent on herself in the last 3 years combined. Maybe more than she'd spent on herself in a decade. But the worst part wasn't the money, not really. It was the message. Love the treats, Mom, you really do spoil us. Spoil, as if she were some oblivious old woman, cheerfully funding their luxurious escapades. As if this wasn't theft but generosity, as if her consent was a given, assumed, implied, fabricated. Vivian's phone buzzed again. Another message from Rachel. Lucas and I are loving Paris. You should see the view from our suite. Champagne tastes better when it's French. Attached was a photo, Rachel on a velvet chaise, her legs stretched, diamond bracelet glinting in the sunlight. Vivian stared at the image. That bracelet alone was nearly $20,000. A piece she would never in her lifetime buy for herself, a piece now sitting on the wrist of a woman who had never earned her trust, but had taken everything else. For a moment she simply stared. Then she rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the rose garden David had planted, the one she now tended alone. She clenched the edge of the curtain, her knuckles pale. Rachel thought she had pulled off the perfect heist. But Vivian had just remembered something important. The credit card Rachel had used wasn't just hers. It belonged to a business. A business still legally alive. And Rachel had just crossed into very dangerous territory. The phone rang later that evening. Vivian checked the screen and felt a strange mixture of hope and dread. Lucas. She answered, trying to keep her voice calm. Hi, sweetheart. Hey, Mom. His voice was distant, hesitant. Listen, I wanted to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Vivian sat down, her heart beat faster. Of course, what is it? Did you tell Rachel she could use your credit card for our anniversary trip? Vivian froze. She said you insisted on treating us, Lucas continued. That you wanted it to be a surprise, but now you're having second thoughts. It felt like a punch to the chest. Vivian swallowed hard. Lucas, she said carefully, I never gave Rachel or anyone permission to use my credit card. Not for anything. Silence. Then Lucas sighed. Mom, come on. Rachel showed me your texts. The ones where you told her to treat herself. You don't remember. Vivian's jaw tightened. There are no texts. I never sent those. Another pause. She thought maybe you forgot. I mean, you've been under a lot of stress lately. And Dr. Sandler did mention that grief can affect memory. Vivian blinked. Dr. Sandler? My physician. You talked to him. He's been our family doctor for years. I was concerned about you. Vivian stood up. I know exactly what I've said and done, Lucas. Someone used my card without permission. That's theft. Lucas was quiet again. When he finally spoke, he sounded weary. Let's just talk when we're back. I don't want to ruin the trip over a misunderstanding. Vivian's voice sharpened. $53,000 is not a misunderstanding. There was a pause. Wait, what? Rachel said it was a few thousand. For the hotel. Some souvenirs. Vivian could hear it. The crack in his certainty. The start of doubt. Lucas, she said, her voice low, when you get home, check her luggage, check her jewelry box. Then ask yourself if a few $1,000s could have bought all of that. She ended the call before he could respond. The silence afterward wasn't comforting. It was hollow, echoing. Rachel had stolen more than money. She had stolen Vivian's son. And worse, she'd made Vivian question whether she'd imagined it all. But that feeling wouldn't last much longer. Not after what Vivian was about to uncover. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time Vivian closed her eyes, she saw Rachel's smirking face in that Paris photo. The diamond bracelet, the champagne, the nerve. At 2:17 a.m., she turned on her bedside lamp, slipped on her glasses, and opened her laptop. She logged into every account she had: banking, credit cards, even the old business ones she hadn't touched in over a year. That's when the pattern started to emerge. It hadn't started in Paris. There was a charge from 3 months ago, $820 at a downtown steakhouse. Vivian had been home that night, eating soup alone. Another from 6 weeks back, $1,150 at a spa in a neighborhood she never visited. More followed, $2,600 at Nordstrom, $1,900 at a boutique hotel in Napa, $780 at a hair salon. Each one small enough to escape immediate notice. But together? A strategy, a build-up, a test. Rachel had been slowly, deliberately siphoning money just enough to avoid alarms, testing the limits, seeing how far she could push before anyone noticed. And then she'd gone too far. Vivian sorted the charges again, filtering by card. That's when the real shock hit her. The bulk of the theft hadn't been on her personal accounts. It was the Ellis Hart business card. The one tied to the consulting firm she had built with David 30 years ago. The company that hadn't officially shut down. That still had open books. That still had government oversight. And there, clear as day, was the name. Authorized user, Lucas Hart. Which meant Rachel's spree hadn't just been unethical. It was corporate fraud. Vivian sat back, heart racing. She remembered every seminar she'd attended on financial compliance. Every client call where she'd warned others about misuse of business funds. She remembered what her accountant used to say. Corporate fraud? That's the big leagues. Fines, jail time, federal investigations. Rachel hadn't just stolen from a grieving widow. She'd committed a white-collar crime against a federally registered business. And now, Vivian had all the documentation to prove it. The next morning she didn't cry. She made coffee. Then she pulled out her navy suit, the one she hadn't worn since David's funeral, and began preparing for the most important meeting she'd had in years. Because if Rachel wanted to play games, she'd just chosen the wrong opponent. Vivian Hart wasn't just a mother anymore. She was a businesswoman again. And this time she was going to win. Vivian hadn't stepped into the Ellis Hart building in nearly a year. But the key still turned smoothly in the glass front door. The security lights clicked on as she entered, heels echoing across the marble floors. Maria, the front desk receptionist, looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Hart, I wasn't expecting you." Vivian offered a small, controlled smile. "I need access to the financial files. Is Jennifer in?" "I'll call her right away." Jennifer Morrison, the firm's financial advisor for over a decade, appeared minutes later. Her sharp gray suit and clipped tone hadn't changed. But her eyes flickered with curiosity as she took in Vivian's appearance. "Vivian, everything all right?" "I need to review all transactions made with the company credit cards over the last 8 months, Vivian said, her voice even. Jennifer paused. "Is there an issue?" "There might be. Let's look at the statements." In the conference room where Vivian and David had once signed million-dollar contracts, they sat side by side. Jennifer spread out spreadsheets, statements, vendor lists. Vivian pointed, line by line. Designer stores, high-end spas, first-class airfare, luxury dining. Jennifer's expression darkened. "These aren't business expenses." "No," Vivian said. "They're not." "Who made the charges?" "The card was issued to Lucas as an authorized user, but I believe his wife was the one actually spending." Jennifer leaned back, jaw tight. "That's not just a violation. It's misrepresentation of funds. It's fraud, Vivian." "What are the implications?" "Federal charges, IRS audits, civil penalties, possibly jail time if it's proven intentional." Vivian nodded slowly. "I thought so." Jennifer folded her hands. "What do you want to do?" Vivian looked out the window at the city skyline. It had changed since David passed, but the fire inside her hadn't. "I want documentation. I want a full report of every purchase, and I want the company's legal team briefed." Jennifer gave a small nod. "We'll begin immediately." But Vivian, if Lucas was aware of this, he could be held equally responsible. "Then I need to find out how deep this goes." As she left the building, wind tugged at her blazer. She walked taller than she had in years. The pain was still there, so was the betrayal. But beneath it all, something else was stirring. Vivian Hart was done surviving. She was about to start fighting. And this time, it was going to be on her terms. Sunday evening arrived crisp and still. Vivian had spent the day preparing Lucas's favorite meal, roast chicken with rosemary potatoes and honey-glazed carrots. Her hands moved automatically through the motions, but this dinner wasn't about comfort. It was about truth. At exactly 6 p.m., the doorbell rang. Rachel stepped inside first, glowing in a cream-colored dress Vivian didn't recognize, likely another item bought with stolen money. Her heels clicked confidently against the hardwood floor, on her wrist the Cartier diamond bracelet. Vivian smiled. Dinner's ready. They sat around the table like a family pretending not to be at war. Rachel talked easily about the view from their Paris suite, the wine, the food. Lucas chimed in now and then, but his eyes kept darting between the two women. Vivian let them talk, let them feel safe. Until dessert. There's something I'd like to discuss, Vivian said, her voice steady. Rachel paused, fork in hand. Of course. Everything okay? I've been reviewing my financial records. I noticed some unusual charges, luxury items, travel, high-end dining. Rachel's smile faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned. Vivian met her gaze. I'm sure there is. That's why I brought documentation. She reached behind her chair and placed a folder on the table. Lucas looked up. Mom? These are statements from the Ellis Hart business account, Vivian said. The charges weren't made to my personal card. They were made using a corporate credit line. Rachel's face paled. That must be a mistake. No mistake. Each purchase is documented, including the $18,000 bracelet you're wearing right now, all coded under false categories like client entertainment and business lodging. Lucas stared at the papers. Wait, this was the company card. Vivian nodded. A card tied to a legally active business, subject to IRS oversight. Rachel stood abruptly. Vivian, you're making this more dramatic than it needs to be. Vivian's voice never wavered. $75,000 isn't drama. It's felony-level fraud. Silence filled the room. Lucas leaned back in his chair, the realization hitting him like a slow collapse. Vivian reached for her tea. The mask had slipped. And now, Rachel would have to face what lay behind it. Rachel's posture shifted, her chin lifted in defiance, but her eyes betrayed her. You're overreacting, she said tightly. It was just a card mix-up. I thought it was your personal one. And besides, you always say you never spend on yourself, we figured. Vivian cut her off. You figured I wouldn't notice, or wouldn't care, or couldn't fight back. She pulled a second folder from beneath the first. This, she said, sliding it toward Lucas, is what made me realize this wasn't carelessness. It was calculated. Lucas opened it. Inside, photographs of printed documents, handwritten notes, financial records, property value assessments, even screenshots of inheritance law articles. At the bottom, a page titled in neat cursive, Asset Access Timeline. Lucas read aloud, Establish pattern of confusion. Encourage financial dependency. Secure power of attorney by December. Full control by Q2 next year. He looked up slowly. Rachel didn't speak. Rachel, he said, voice raw, what is this? It's not what it looks like. Really? Because it looks like you were planning to take over my mother's life. Her business. Her house. Her finances. Rachel's eyes brimmed with tears. I was trying to protect our future. Your mom is sitting on more money than we'll ever have. She lives alone, clinging to memories and square footage she doesn't need. I thought. You thought if you painted her as forgetful and fragile, no one would question it when you took control, Vivian finished. Lucas stood, pushing back his chair. You've been lying to me for years. Rachel turned desperate. You're not seriously taking her side. There are no sides, he said, voice low. Just truth. And what you did is unforgivable. Vivian let the moment hang. Then she said, You still have a choice, Rachel. I haven't filed the report yet. If you return every item, repay every dollar with interest, and sign a formal statement admitting to unauthorized use, I'll keep it out of court. Rachel scoffed. You think I can pay that back? You'll figure it out, Vivian replied. Get a job. Sell your car. You're resourceful. Rachel's mask cracked again. You're trying to destroy me. No, you destroyed yourself. Vivian said calmly. I'm just refusing to let you destroy anyone else. Silence. Lucas turned away from Rachel and looked at his mother, really looked at her for the first time in a long while. And he realized she hadn't just survived. She had just declared war. And she was winning. Vivian stood slowly, her spine straight, her voice cool and precise. I've spoken to the company's legal team, she said. The fraud report is ready to file, but I'm offering you a chance to make it right quietly. Rachel's jaw tightened. What's the deal? Vivian pulled out a final set of documents. You'll sign a promissory note for $78,467, every cent stolen, plus interest and penalties. 5 years to repay it, at 6% annual interest. Rachel laughed, sharp and bitter. We don't have that kind of money. Then find it, Vivian replied. Downsize. Sell your car. Take a job, because if you don't, the other option is federal charges. Fraud, possibly prison. Lucas looked at her. That's all. No court. Vivian shook her head. There's more. She placed a second form on the table. You'll also sign a statement admitting to the misuse of company funds. It stays with my attorney unfiled unless I ever need it, as protection. Rachel stared. You're blackmailing me. Vivian didn't flinch. I'm protecting what's mine. And what about family? Rachel demanded. You're going to cut me off. Pretend I was never here? Vivian's face remained still. You'll have no contact with me from this moment on. No family dinners, no holidays, no visits. My home, my life, and my peace are mine again. Rachel looked to Lucas, waiting for him to object. He didn't. You're letting her erase me? She whispered. Lucas looked at her with a kind of sorrow that didn't beg to be fixed. You erased yourself. Vivian watched Rachel fold no more defiance, only disbelief. You have 48 hours to sign everything, Vivian said. Otherwise, the file goes to the IRS. Rachel stood too quickly. Her chair screeched against the floor. You'll regret this. Both of you, when you're sitting in that empty house with no one left. Vivian walked to the door and opened it for her. I've been alone for 3 years, Rachel. The only difference now is I won't have to pretend otherwise. Rachel stormed out. In. And in the hush that followed, Lucas sat back down, eyes wide, voice low. Mom, he said, I didn't know. Vivian placed a hand over his. I did. And now, she was finally doing something about it. Lucas stayed the night. The night. Not because he had nowhere else to go, but because he didn't want to leave. Vivian found him the next morning sitting in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, staring out at the rose garden. His hair was a mess, his face tired, but something about him looked younger, lighter. I should have seen it, he said quietly. Should have stopped it before it got this far. Vivian joined him at the table. You were in love. You trusted her. That's not a weakness, Lucas. That's what makes you human. He looked at her, tears close behind his eyes. She said you were slipping, said you'd forget things, that you were lonely. I thought maybe she was helping. Vivian smiled sadly. She was helping herself. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. The signed documents arrived by courier. Rachel didn't show her face. She didn't call. She didn't fight. Boxes began to appear, designer shoes, jewelry, clothes with tags still on. One by one, the symbols of her manipulation were returned, as meaningless as they always had been. Vivian watched as Lucas moved back into his childhood bedroom temporarily. She let him take the lead, giving him space, but always making room. One evening over dinner, he asked, So what happens now, with you, with all this space? I'm selling the house, Vivian said simply.
Lucas blinked. Really?
It's time. Too many memories and too many corners where Rachel's shadow still lingers. I need something smaller, lighter. Where will you go? Downtown. By the waterfront. There's a condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and a concierge who calls everyone darling. It sounds peaceful. Lucas grinned. Sounds like freedom. Vivian nodded. That's exactly what it is. He hesitated. And me. What about you?
I've been offered a job, downtown, consulting firm, good salary, new team. I want to take it.
You should. But I was waiting. I didn't want to leave you alone again. Vivian took his hand. Lucas, I've been alone a long time, but now I'm free. And I want the same for you. He smiled through wet eyes. Then we start over. Both of us. She raised her glass to starting over. As they toasted in the golden light of the kitchen walls, still lined with old photos and fresh absence, Vivian felt it. Not grief. Not vengeance. Just relief. And the quiet beginning of something new. 6 months later, Vivian stood in her new condo, barefoot, holding a warm mug of tea, as sunlight streamed through the windows. The harbor glittered beyond the glass, sailboats drifting like thoughts she no longer needed to chase. The house was gone, the memories were packed away, but nothing important had been lost. Lucas had moved into his own place 2 blocks away. His new job suited him. He smiled more now. Laughed easier. He still visited every Sunday, always bringing something from the bakery they'd discovered together. Vivian had joined a book club, then a photography class, then a walking group that met Tuesday mornings along the waterfront. She was meeting people again. But this time they weren't seeing her as a widow or a mother or a victim. They were meeting Vivian Hart. One evening, after book club, Lucas showed up with a bottle of champagne and a wide grin. "What are we celebrating?" she asked.